Welcome to the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, named after the brothers whose idea for a race in Mexico was so compelling that it got presidential approval. And we're glad it did. Welcome along to the Mexico City Grand Prix. At 2,285 meters above sea level, the thin air of the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez poses a unique challenge, not just to a driver's skill, but to the efficiency of their engines as well. 17 corners then make a lap of this 2.6-mile circuit, expect incredible speeds in excess of 220 miles per hour, and overtaking into the braking zones of Turn 1 and Turn 4. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. An immense lap from Fernando Alonso yesterday puts him on pole position. Sergio Perez lines up alongside. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Leclerc, Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, Russell, Hamilton, Norris, Stroll, Sainz, Gasly, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Sargent, Albon, Ocon, Bottas, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, and Zhou Guanyu. It's almost time for those 5 red lights to go out then. Let's see who can prevail today. Anthony Davidson is with me once again to take you through today's action. And we have plenty of twists and turns to come over the next hour or so, I'm sure. Let's have a chat about Fernando Alonso.
Well, it was a really impressive lap in qualifying to get pole position, but are they going to be able to hold on to the lead into the first corner with so many quick starters around them? One more thing to consider is the strategy element. How far can the drivers push these tyres, and who's going to blink first for fresh rubber? It'll be interesting to see if the leaders have to compromise their plan to cover off the cars behind them.
Right, let's get the car up to temperature on this lap, please. We're loading the gears, so let's go through them all if you can. No rain expected for the time being. Okay, not the best placement there, mate. Let's try and get a good launch as the race starts. Keep an eye on the lights. The start sequence will begin as soon as the grid is formed. Be ready with the clutch. the fastest lap of the race. Keep this up. Well done. Job. That was the fastest lap of the race so far. Great work, that's a new fastest lap of the race. Okay mate, don't worry about the damage. I've got some new strategy options if you go and check your MFD. Okay, push, push. Gap to the car behind. 3.6 seconds. approaching the pit window and you're going to be on mediums. Caution, caution. No need to worry about the tyre condition for now, everything's looking good. Push now, we're boxing this lap. Okay, let's go now, come on. Perfect job on the turn in there, mate. Looks like a nice stop time. We're happy with that one. Pit strategy complete. See these tyres through to the end now. Okay, Lewis is in for his stop. Hulkenberg is stopping now. Okay, car behind trailing us, 5.9 seconds. Gap to your teammate ahead is 5.1 seconds. And some information on Leclerc. They've got an issue with their car, they're going to be slow. gap to the car in front is less than 1 second now. Well done. Let's try and get past in the DRS zone. You're increasing the gap to the car behind by a few seconds per lap. Keep it up. That's just 5 laps of fuel remaining. Okay, careful with the overtakes. That was a bit risky. We could have received a penalty. Right, we've got enough fuel for 3 more laps. OK, we've only got 1 lap of fuel remaining. All right, race over. Take care of the car on the way in.
It was a magnificent race and a drive right out of the top draw to take the win for Red Bull today. Tell me, Ant, how do they manage to achieve this win?
I think a large part of the result comes down to temperament. They were able to keep their heads when everyone around them was losing theirs, and that's allowed them to get the best out of the car, to maximise the strategy, and to stay out of trouble.
The drivers are en route to the podium as we speak. What a fantastic win for the Red Bull team. They performed exceptionally today, keeping us firmly on the edge of our seats throughout the entirety of the race. Congratulations to everybody at the team. Some amazing talent out on the track today. But Anthony, who would you pick as your driver of the day?
Max Verstappen seemed to just effortlessly weave through the other drivers today without a care in the world. He was definitely my driver of choice.
Well, what an end to another fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you for the next one.